What's the subject for today?
So we have buyers who are closing on a new construction home next week, and we just put another buyer under agreement for another new construction home. So I figured it would be good to talk about new construction homes. What do you think?
Well, seeing as how it seems like all our closings right now are going to be new construction, it seems like a pretty good topic to get into.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I know that there are definitely some differences just having worked with these few buyers. So maybe let's start with what are some of the different new construction homes and what is the difference in the process when you're buying a new construction home versus an existing build?
So you're basically going to run into two types. There's going to be a one-off design where you as the buyer and the builder sort of pick a lot. You've picked a design for a house and you've been working together right from the word go. So you're going into it with a plan together as a team. The other
So this is like a complete from scratch build.
yeah, typically from scratch build. You might have a lot of land that you targeted and you want to buy that with the builder.
Does the builder already have a design in mind, or do you also work with the builder on the design?
Both can happen. So the builder might have a rough idea design, like they may have a design, and then the two of you sat down and started making the changes to fit your needs. Bigger rooms, smaller rooms, putting the kitchen on one side or the other, or bigger islands. Like you're making changes. Maybe I want laundry on the second floor instead of first floor.
Yeah.
And the two of you are working all that out while you're finding the lot that you want to build on. And then once you find the lot, you purchase the lot, and you're hiring the builder to build the house for you. It's a lot more interactive between you and the builder. The other that you're going to run into would be what a lot of people call a spec build. And that's where the builder goes, finds the land. A lot of times where we are here in New England, there's already an existing house on it, and it's going to get torn down, and they're going to build a new property on that. And they call it a spec build because the builder is speculating someone's going to buy this house. So
Yeah.
he's fronting everything. He's paying for the land. He's paying for the materials up front. He paid for the architect to design the property, paid for the engineer to survey the land, and then he starts building the house. And then depending on the builder, at some point during the build, they're going to put it up for sale.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them will list it the day they pour concrete. Others want to wait until they're completely done with the house and somewhere in between.
So let's say they put it on the market before the house is complete and somebody wants to buy it, but the house hasn't been finished yet. At that point, can they make changes to the design, or does the builder have a specific design in mind at that point and no changes can be made?
So it depends on how much changes you want to make. So if you're just going to be changing slight floor plan changes, like you're going to make one room bigger than the other, but it's not going to structurally affect the house. Because if you look at a house, you've got the exterior of the house holding weight, and then there's typically a beam that runs through the middle of the house, and that's going to be a load bearing. And then there might be a couple of other load-bearing points inside the building, depending on the design. So long as you're not moving any of those, you and the builder will very quickly and easily just sort of say, hey, I want to make a bigger pantry or a smaller kitchen, and they'll just put up a wall or take down a wall.
Do you find that some builders are more open to making those types of changes than others?
Yeah, and the builders who typically don't like to make the changes, they tend to wait till they've completed the house. And
so
then
that nobody can make any changes at that point.
I've worked with builders where you literally ask them for a different type of flooring, and they're like, no. We're putting in white oak, it's white oak, or we're putting in red oak, it's red oak, and they won't make any changes.
Now, is there any way to know that ahead of time? Let's say you have a buyer you're working with who likes to put a lot of finishing touches on the design and they do want to make a lot of changes. Can you somehow figure that out to make sure that it's a good fit between the buyer and the builder? Or is there really no way of knowing until you get into the project?
So if you're going to be working with a builder where you're designing it together, that's a conversation you're going to have very early on, and you're going to know right away, can I work with this builder or not? It's kind of like you're dating the builder. So you have a first couple of dates and you figure out if things are going to work, and then if it doesn't, then you go find another builder. But if you've got a builder who's building a house and you want that location and you basically want that house and you want to make a few changes to it, you might just run into a brick wall where that guy's not going to make any changes, and you have to decide, all right, am I going to move forward with this house, or am I going to go buy something else and get something that's going to be tailored specifically to my needs?
Mm-hmm.
You can't force somebody to do something, especially if the builder owns the land, owns the building, and you're just the person coming to buy the house. It's his project.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that.
Right. What is the process with new construction? So, when you have an existing build, the buying process is pretty simple. You put in an offer gets accepted, you write up the PNS, and you get your mortgage and you close. I
Yeah.
mean, that's simplifying it. But with a new construction, there's a lot more detail that goes into that. So what are some of the main differences?
So the biggest difference is when you're purchasing an existing home, you've got your offer, your purchase and sale, your home inspection. Like you said, you're done. With new construction, there's going to be, depending on where you're in the process, if it's just a framed out house, there's going to be a specification sheet. And that is letting you know what's going to be in the house. It's going to state what type of flooring. It's going to state what windows. I mean, it might even go as far as to say, actually, what you'll read a lot is you'll see something. They'll say, Anderson windows high E or similar.
Mm-hmm.
Idea being, you could look up what an Anderson high E efficiency window is and say, all right, so if he can't put in the Anderson, he's going to put in the Pella. What's the Pella equivalent of it? So when they say or similar, they're saying something that or better.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to get bargain basement when you thought you were getting Anderson, but you might end up with Pella, or you might end up with Matthews Brothers for your windows instead of Anderson. And that could just be because of supply. When it comes time for the windows, when they go to order the windows, Anderson could be, we're backed up 6 months. So they'll head over to Matthews Brothers and they'll get their windows.
So there are a lot of things in the house that the builder is going to basically pick out and put in the specifications sheet, because obviously the buyer can't pick everything out.
Yeah.
But there are some things that the buyer is going to have to work with vendors to pick out. What are some of those things?
So if you're buying a house and it's only at the framing stage, or they got the drywall up, and you're going to be picking your kitchen cabinets, you're going to pick your appliances, you might be picking your flooring, you almost always end up picking your tile. You'll be picking light fixtures sometimes.
Bathroom finishes?
Yep. Everything from the faucets to the shower heads to the toilet. Mm-hmm. And you'll be picking all of it. And you want to do it sooner than later, because some of this stuff can be delayed. If you're ordering very fancy or unique item, there could be delivery periods. It might not be something that's going to show up in a week. It might be 6 to 8 weeks. It could be 8 to 12 weeks before it comes. So if you go under agreement on Monday, you should get your vendors list off the builder as soon as possible and start scheduling to meet with them. Mm-hmm. And even if they say, oh, you got 6 to 8 weeks before you need to pick your cabinets, go pick your cabinets now. It takes a lot longer than you think to pick them. You're probably going to meet with that cabinet guy 3, 4, 5 times. So if they say you got 6 to 8 weeks and you wait 6 weeks between having a job, kids, maybe somebody's out sick, now all of a sudden you've gone too long and you can't get the cabinets ordered in time, and that's going to affect when the house can be delivered.
Yeah. And I know that some buyers might have a hard time, maybe this is their first time buying a home and now they have to pick all of these different things. Do you usually just leave them to their own devices?
No.
Or are you involved in that process? And if so, how?
So I'll initially be involved on all the stages. So when they meet with their cabinet guy for the first time, I like to go and meet with the cabinet guy for 2 reasons. One, make sure they're not going to get upsell on everything, because the cabinet guy makes commission, so he's going to want to talk you into a whole load of stuff. And if you want it all, fine, get it all. But more importantly, I've worked on a lot of kitchens and I know what you need, and you might forget something. It's something as simple as putting a Lazy Susan in a corner cabinet, or the cabinets underneath the lower cabinets under the island when you have the drawers to pull out. You open up to get your pots and pans, you want to make sure you paid the extra $150 to get the pull-out drawers so you can get and access all your pots and pans.
So when they go and talk to let's say the cabinet vendor, does the vendor have a plan of what kind of kitchen he's dealing with? And he'll know that, let's say you need a Lazy Susan in the corner, or is the buyer expected to know that?
Yes and no.
So that's why you go with them.
Yeah. So
it sounds like there can be a lot that goes wrong in that process.
Yeah. So they're going to get a floor plan off the builder, and they're going to meet. They'll get the floor plan prior.
Who's they, the buyer or the vendor?
The vendor. So the vendor will have a floor plan, so he knows the space to work with. And chances are he's designed a kitchen for that space. Not necessarily your kitchen, but he's designed a kitchen that'll work in that space. And you're going to come in and you're going to have in mind what you wanted in the kitchen. Now, you might say, I want a 10-foot island that's 4 feet or 5 feet wide, because that's what I've always wanted. He'll give it to you, but if that kitchen is too small for it, you're going to get choke points in the kitchen, and you're going to hate working in that kitchen.
Yeah.
So I go just so I can point out that might be a little tight. Maybe we should mock it up in the house before you make that final decision. Mm-hmm. And we'll go back to the house and we'll run string and we'll tape things around, and you can sort of get a feel for what it's like to walk through.
Kind of like what we did when we designed our kitchen, and
Yeah,
we still made mistakes.
we still made mistakes, and again, it wasn't my first kitchen, but it was my first solo kitchen at that point, and that
Yeah.
was what 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So even if that, we still have like 3 choke points where we bang into each other in the kitchen. So I want to make sure my clients don't run into that.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that when you open your oven door, there's plenty of space for you to walk around the door between the oven and the island if the oven's going to be in front of the island. Or when you open the refrigerator doors, are you not going to force somebody off the seats in the island? Is there enough space if the kitchen sink is in an alcove? Is there enough space for people to move around? Or would it make sense to move it to a larger place? So we'll just have those conversations, and we'll make sure that they get as close to what they want as a kitchen.
Yeah. I think another challenge with new construction, especially if the buyers are adding a lot of different custom features, the big challenge that I'm running into on the current transaction that we're working with is documenting everything so that everybody knows what's going on, what's being added, what this thing is called, make sure everybody knows specifications and the terminology, and that they're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to also have a very good attorney writing the P&S, right? Because there's a lot of detail involved there. Do you think that it's especially important with new construction to have a really good attorney on your side?
Yeah. So one of the things you need to do is when you're designing the spec sheet with the builder, if you're the buyer, and you're at the process where you're trying to figure out what they're going to include, what they're not going to include, plus also what are the extras you want, and what are the prices going to be for those extras, and what's the timeline for those extras. All of a sudden, your basic purchase and sale can explode by 10 pages, and a good attorney and a good listing agent, a good buyer's agent are going to be able to coordinate with the builder and with the buyer to really sort of simplify the document as much as possible and clarify everything as succinctly and easily as possible. Because you got a client moving from the Midwest, and they're going to call a bookshelf or a built-in cabinetry, they might call it an armoire, and maybe that's what they grew up calling it.
Yeah.
Well, over here, that's a freestanding piece of furniture. So when you're like a dresser, so they're expecting a built-in cabinet, and they get a freestanding armoire. So you have to make sure that if the terminology everybody understands, and they're all speaking the same language. And if the house is big, like the one we're working on right now, it's one thing. If you got a 1,500 square foot house, the number of extras and changes you're going to make are very, very small. You have a 4,000, 5,000 square foot house. Yeah. You can have 12, 13, 14 rooms that you're working on, and there can be a change in every single room, 2 or 3 changes. It can get unruly really fast. So a good attorney who's going to make sure that the legal document states everything that you want stated legally, so you get what you're legally going to be getting. I don't speak legalese. The listing agent doesn't speak legalese. We can relay the information to the attorney, and the 2 attorneys can make sure that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't speak legalese, but at the same time, it's also up to us as agents to make sure that there is one complete list that everybody agrees to before that actually goes into the P&S. Because right now, the builder was calling something one thing, we were calling it something else, and it was on 2 different lists, but it was really the same thing. So making sure that it's all consolidated into one comprehensive document, I think is really important, and that's where the agents come in, and then the attorneys put it into the P&S and add the legalese around it.
And when you're all done and you have the specification sheet and you have the extras list and everything's all set and the purchase and sales put together and everybody assigned everything, about a week later, the buyer's going to say, you know what I would really like? So you're going to end up getting an addendum to the purchase and sale. With new construction, it is
one
almost
if you're
guaranteed.
lucky. Yeah.
So you're almost guaranteed there's going to be that addendum to purchase and sale.
Or multiple addendums.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a buyer who's overzealous and wants to keep making changes.
Or make a change and then try and change it back. So one of the things I say to my buyers is, all right, we're going to go with X. Is this what you want? Because once they start building it, if you change your mind, it's going to cost you double, because they're going to have to rip out what's there now and then put in something different. So if you're going to be going with slider doors in the bathroom, and once the slider doors are installed, you decided you wanted the frameless glass door that opens, well, you've bought the $3,000 slider door, and now you're going to buy the $5,000 frameless glass, plus you're going to pay for the install twice.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that done for free.
Yeah, it's really good to make sure you know exactly what you're ordering, what design you really want and nail down the details before it goes into the legal document, because changing anything after that is really difficult because it has to go through that whole process again.
So one of the other things that you have to take into account is when you're buying a pre-existing house, they walk in, they view the house, they like it, they have their home inspection. 30 days later, you're closing on the house. With new construction, while the property's being built, somebody needs to go and keep checking on what's happening to make sure there wasn't a miscommunication. So you've got the perfect purchase and sale. You nailed it on the specification sheet. We've got the extras all set up. Mistakes still happen.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure you catch any mistakes early on so it can be corrected. So one of the things I do with new construction is I do bi-weekly visits. I just swing by, I take a picture, there's the foundation. Come back 2 weeks later, the house is framed. Another picture. Come back 2 weeks later, they've got drywall up. I mean, this is really escalated. It doesn't happen that fast, but as things are happening, I'm taking pictures, and I've got the floor plan, I've got the specification sheets, and I can see, have they made a mistake? Were they supposed to add Cat 5 cables to the master bedroom and they didn't? Well, the drywall's not up yet. They can very easily just add the cables.
Or, oh, it's a 2-story, but it was supposed to be a ranch.
Right, that's an extreme.
I'm assuming that doesn't happen.
I haven't seen it happen yet, but yeah, sure.
I mean, that would have to be some real huge miscommunication.
And one of the things that's going to happen is the buyer, this is the house they're buying, and they want to visit as often as possible. They love it. They want to see it. So they have to understand it's a construction site. It's not safe. You shouldn't just show up there. If you're going, we have to let them know.
You have to make an appointment.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're going to want us to go later in the afternoon after the contractors have left, on the weekend.
Another reason why you wouldn't want to just show up, you might walk in and the walls have just been painted and you're touching the walls. You just don't know what's been done.
Yeah, so we have to let them know when we're coming, and you have to be very, very specific about the days and times you're coming. Because they could be doing polyurethane on Saturday in the evening, and you say we're going to come Saturday afternoon, and then we just show up 4 hours late and we didn't tell them there's fresh polyurethane on the floor. We walk in, we've just destroyed the floors. So we have to be very
careful and just let the other side know ahead of time. Just basically make an appointment every time you want to go see it.
And they might say, no, you can't come this weekend. It's not safe right now. There's too much disturbance going on. There's loose electric wires, whatever it is. So they might say, you can't go in this weekend. Can you go next weekend?
Going back to picking out different finishes, what usually takes the longest to order? What should the buyers decide on the fastest?
So typically it's going to be your kitchen cabinets and your appliances. You have off-the-shelf kitchen cabinets where you could literally just go into like a Home Depot or a Lowe's or like American Cabinets, and they have the standard stuff that's built locally. You're going to get a craft-made shaker cabinet. They probably have 1,000 of them in stock. They'll get that delivered 2 to 4 weeks, no big deal. But there are cabinets that are custom built, custom sizes. So with kitchen cabinets, it can be 2 to 4 weeks, it could be 6 to 8 weeks, it can be 12 to 16 weeks for your kitchen cabinets. So once you've picked your cabinets, you want to do it early. But once you've picked it, you want to make sure that that item is going to be delivered on time. And then appliances, the same thing. There's off-the-shelf appliances. Like you walk into Home Depot and Lowe's and say, I want this GE stove. You could take it home that day. There are a lot of appliances, especially more of the higher-end stuff. You could be 3 months, 6 months sometimes. I've last couple of years, I've seen higher-end stoves and ranges taking 6 months to be delivered. Some of the bigger refrigerators can take time. So those are the two things that run into the biggest delays because they're, I don't want to say custom build, but they don't build them until they've been ordered.
So speaking of delays, what would you say causes the biggest delays with new construction?
So here in New England, weather is probably the number one. If you're building throughout the winter, even if the building is sealed in and they could still be working inside it, a lot of people forget that contractors are also plow guys. So when the snowstorm comes, they blow off and they go plowing. So they're losing time there. You run into delays with drywall in the winter. So if you're putting up drywall in the winter, the inside of the house has to be at a certain temperature for the drywall and the plaster to cure before you can paint. If they're not putting in heaters or enough heaters, instead of it taking 7 days for the drywall and the plaster to dry enough where the moisture's out where you can paint, you could be looking at 10 days or 14 days. Like it can take longer. So that'll slow down the delivery time. So like I said, weather's probably the biggest. And then the next is staffing. So you've got a painter, he has a crew of 12 and they work on 3 houses. 2 guys call in sick, somebody quits, now he's down a crew but he has the same number of jobs, so the jobs spread out and they take a little longer for him to get there and paint. And then you're going to run into permitting issues. So you're dealing with a town, dealing with the town building inspectors. They run on their schedule. A lot of towns only do inspections 1 day or 2 days a week. They'll line up the buildings and they'll go out that day. So if you're requesting an inspection on Thursday and they do their inspections on Wednesday, the earliest he's going to get out there is the following Wednesday. But he might be booked that Wednesday, so it might be 2 weeks before you get your electrical inspection or your plumbing inspection, and that's going to cause a delay as well.
Mm-hmm.
And supplies. You need insulation, but they don't have it, so you're waiting a week or 2 weeks for them to get the material.
I mean, that was probably a bigger issue during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And after,
but it's
but it's still a little bit of an issue.
It was an issue before it. It was a huge issue during it. It's still an issue now. Like you can run into shipping delays when the tanker got caught in the canal. That was 12 weeks that bottlenecked up delivery of items that were coming from Asia.
Yeah.
So it's not just pandemics. There's a lot that can cause delays.
Now, you've worked on a few new construction projects. What has been the biggest challenge for you working on new construction, whether you're working with a buyer or a seller?
So for me, the biggest problem I run into is the other agent. So I've worked a lot of new construction. And if you've got an agent who's never worked new construction before, whether the listing agent or the buyer's agent, they might not understand everything they need to do. And staying on top of them can be difficult. And periodically you run into somebody, they don't want to be involved. My clients bought the house, I've done my job, I can just sit back. Or you'll have a listing agent who's, I listed the property, I showed you the property, I gave you the list of vendors, what more do you want from me? So some people aren't going to be as proactive, and when you run into somebody like that, you just need to pick up the slack as the agent, whether you're the buyers or the sellers.
Yeah, you kind of have to do a job of two agents sometimes if you want the project to close.
Yep, and the hard part is you can't tell anybody. You just have to make sure it goes through nice, clean, you don't cry, you don't squawk, you don't say word one to your client for one, to the builder. You suck it up, you get it done, and everybody goes home happy.
Yeah, all right. I think that's all the questions that I have. Any parting words of wisdom when it comes to buying a new construction home for all the buyers out there?
Yep. So in the movies, when you buy a new construction house, it's got a beautiful lawn in the front, a beautiful lawn in the back. Everything is perfect and ready to go. 9 times out of 10, especially here in New England, depending on when you're closing, you might have rubble, dirt. Hydro seed. You might have sod that's not setting in properly. The irrigation system might not have gone in. You may have thought you're getting an irrigation system because you've always had an irrigation system. Well, guess what this house doesn't have? It doesn't have an irrigation system. So you're going to run into a lot of uncomfortable moments right towards the end.
Actually, it's always an uncomfortable moment for me because I do pretty much all of our marketing and social media. And when I get the tile for social media, under agreement, and I look at the house, it's a beautiful house, and it's sitting on this pile of dirt. And I'm like, ugh, is this what I'm posting? But it's all I have, so just keep that in mind. So,
but when you move into the house, there's not going to be a pile of dirt. They will rake it, they will screen it, but I mean, you won't necessarily have grass there. Like that has surprised.
That takes a little while to come in.
That surprises most of my buyers when they're like, "Where's my lawn? It's coming. It'll be here in 6 to 8 weeks."
It's growing.
Oh, one more thing. Punch list items. With new construction, about a week before closing, you want to walk through the house once they've gotten their final appraisal, once they've gotten their certificate of occupancy, and the builder is essentially done. You want to go through. Some builders go through with a fine-tooth comb and they find every issue. Some don't. Some just miss items. So
it's still up to you as the buyer to go with your agent and take a look at the final build and make sure that everything is
how you want it. Make sure they didn't make a mistake with the paint color. Make sure they didn't do a bad job with the paint. Maybe they got 1 coat up and they thought they got 2 coats up. Make sure that there's no accidental debris that got caught into the polyurethane. You just check a few items, have them fix it before you move in. It's going to be so much easier.
A lot of it is probably pretty obvious.
Most of it's pretty obvious, but remember, they were working on this house and they were hustling to try and get it done on time. So they can miss items.
Yeah, especially I'm guessing if, let's say the buyer made a last minute change. Make sure that actually went in and it got done. Because when you keep making changes, like I said before, it's really hard to keep track of everything when the list is this long. So if you got something in at the last minute, make sure everything meets your expectations.
Yeah. So it's good to do that walkthrough about a week before so they've got time to fix it. And then day of closing, you're going to double check and make sure everything that was supposed to be done was done. And then make sure you're still in love with the house. Because if you don't, you can walk away at this point.
Hopefully by that point you're still in love with the house because it's too late to walk away
Yeah.
the day before closing. Don't listen to him. You'll be losing a lot of money if you walk away at that point.
Yeah, I was just kidding.
All right, that's it for today. We'll see you in the next video.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.